Welcome back to Amplify Your Garden as the podcast. So Hannah and I are here today, and we've actually got some special guests that are going to be coming on via Zoom. So we have Luke Baker, our CEO, and Aaron Boldrey, and Joe and Diane Jenkins. So this was one of Aaron Boldrey's ideas. He's great. He's a great visionary and has a plethora of great ideas. But when we were talking about this, he mentioned, there's a lot of or a lot of misconceptions maybe that folks think of, whether it be in gardening or really just growing things, agriculture in general.
Right.
So he had an idea of, why don't we do a couple episodes or a couple segments of, busting those myths or breaking down some of those misconceptions and really, really ironing those out and maybe making some clarifications. So Luke is with us, and if you've been following us, Luke is our CEO. He's all over the Facebook page, and he'll pop in on these YouTube and podcast episodes now and then. Aaron Boldrey is actually from Southern Missouri, and he is an Amplify consultant. He's also on our board of directors. And then Joe and Diane Jenkins are from Tennessee, and again, they are Amplify consultants, but they also, if I had to say master gardener, it would be them. And I think it's more because they have 50 plus years experience of gardening and gardening together. That's how they provide for their family, and they have been since they've gotten together. But before we dive into our special guest, before we get into that Zoom, what is a master gardener? Let's start with that.
Well, I don't know. I think it's really dependent on who you talk to, and I think that there really, at least in my opinion, there really shouldn't be a definition of a master gardener, because, like we've mentioned in previous videos, like you're always learning more. There's never a stopping point in learning. I think if you had to put a definition on it, I think somebody who knows what they're talking about, has produced vegetables, and has actually had a successful garden. I think you don't have to be a gardener for 50 plus years to be a master gardener, because in my opinion, a master gardener doesn't necessarily exist.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there are people who are going to be more helpful when you have questions and need to learn more, and there's going to be people who don't know as much. But I think being a master gardener doesn't mean you need to have all the trinkets and tools and the most massive garden you can imagine. Like, it doesn't have to mean all those things. I just think that if you are producing if you're meeting your goals when it comes to what you want your garden to be, I think you're a master gardener. Because I think on any level, you can always learn more.
Yeah, I love how you said that. So if you are meeting your goals, I would agree that is a master gardener for you. And I would also agree that master gardener, doesn't really exist. I think that is a perception, or maybe that's relative to where you are in your experience.
Right.
So if I would say a master gardener, that's somebody who continues to learn, continues to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and do something different.
Right.
But I'm going to go back to, if you're meeting your goals of what you want to succeed or what you want to achieve in your garden, because your garden needs to work for you. So if you're meeting those goals, I would say box checked.
Right. And there's really no you could be a first year gardener, and if you want to can tomato products and you're doing that, you met your goals. You're doing what you wanted to do. And I think if that's your goal, if your goal is to have this, 2 mile long garden with a bunch of different stuff in it, and you're doing that, then sure, you're a master gardener. I don't know if I necessarily like that term, because it makes it sound like there's a level that you need to get to.
Right. This is not a video game.
And
right.
No, and I think that there's no level, because there's always more things you can learn, and more tips you can play around with. And so I don't know. I think if you had to put a definition on it, that's what it would be. But yeah.
So let's dive into Luke, Aaron, and Joe and Diane.
We're starting a new series that we would like to talk about garden myth busting, and kind of after the TV show MythBusters. And so I've got some guests on with me today, and I'd like to have them take a minute to introduce themselves. So first, let's start with Joe and Diane Jenkins from Tennessee.
I'm Joe Jenkins. We're from Tennessee. We've been gardening for 60, 70 years, and we don't consider ourselves masters, but we seem to be able to grow a good garden.
Well, I've been with Brookside, I don't know how long, my whole life. So we enjoy gardening, and we enjoy visiting with all the other consultants and sharing what information we can with people who want to garden.
Yep. So then that's why I asked you guys to come on, because I know you have just a tremendous, like, I just remember the pictures you've shown me in the past of your garden. So I thought it was great and it's a pleasure to have you guys on today to, help us do a little myth busting. So Aaron, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Aaron Boldrey. I'm in Southeast Missouri. I don't have near the gardening experience as Joe and Diane. We work with, on a professional level, big gardens and small gardens. Everything from 300-acre cornfields to half-acre gardens to take two steps and you're out of the garden kind of farms.
Yeah, and Aaron's on here too because this whole thing was his idea to do myth busting in gardens. So I told him if we were going to do myth busting, he actually had to join. So that's really why Aaron's here. And of course, I'm Luke Baker. I'm actually from the area. I grew up and kind of like Aaron, a lot of experience. Like I grew up on a farm. We had dairy. My grandmother gardened. My mom gardens, and so I've done it for probably, I'll be 45 this year, so I've probably done near 40 years of gardening. And again, of course, we have the project that have outside that we're sharing. So just a group of people getting together and talking about myth busting around gardens. So the first question,
There are so many myths that are out there, and they all start really at the garden center. Hey, this plant likes potassium, or this plant likes phosphorus. Probably one of the biggest myths out there is you have to be a master farmer or a master gardener in order to grow a nice garden.
Yep. So that was the first myth I was going to ask. So do you have to be a master gardener? And again, that is no knock on those people who go out and are master gardeners, because I think that's fantastic. But do you have to be a master gardener to be a gardener or have success in your garden?
Not necessarily. I don't think.
You don't have to talk loud.
Can you hear? I'm talking loud enough, Luke?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that it's just for regular gardens. You just have to pick the right times, get your garden in the right shape, and things will work for you. And sometimes you have to water, sometimes you don't have to water. But it's different things that you have to do. Years ago, when we were working in Lauderdale County in Tennessee, that's where the tomato capital was, kind of. And we worked with probably 80% of the tomato growers. And it was very interesting how they did. They didn't raise tomatoes like we think in a garden sometimes. And so I still try to raise mine like the professionals did. Does it always work? Not as well as some others, but so much of it depends on the weather behind what you do. It's just important to get your hands dirty and get out there and get it done.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here, and So we talked about what is a master gardener, and Joe and Diane have a lot of experience in their own garden, but they also have a lot of experience just within their consulting business and working with different types of growers, different types of farmers, and they've worked with commercial tomato growers. So farmers that are specifically growing tomatoes for that produce market, for the Walmarts and the Aldis and those big grocery stores. So those commercial growers have to do things a little bit differently for efficiency purposes, for harvesting purposes, things of that nature. And Joe grows his tomatoes similarly to what a commercial grower would do because that's his experience. And everybody's going to have those different experiences along the way. I don't necessarily grow mine 100% the commercial way, and one way is not better than the other. Again, this goes back to making your garden work for you and achieving those goals, because when you achieve your own goals, then you're a master gardener.
Yeah, you've had a successful garden.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is patience and watching what others do and then trying to implement some of those ideas in your own garden. And the question that I have is, has everything always been perfect?
No.
How many failures have you had over the years?
Well, I had one last year. But over the years, yes, I don't know how to put a number on it, but honestly speaking, some years are going to be better than others. You'll hear people, my broccoli didn't do well, or my cabbage didn't, my tomatoes just didn't do well. And sometimes all these things take place. And then sometimes varieties make a difference. If you, in tomatoes, determinate varieties, we prune up 3 to 4 at the most and have more foliage. And what they'll do, that will allow you to have less sun scan on your tomatoes. You got more foliage to cover the tomatoes. The other varieties, then the indeterminate varieties, you may prune further up the plant, but that's kind of, it's a little different in varieties is what you do.
What was the big difference between the professional tomato and how we grow tomatoes, in our back garden? And you said you try to, mimic more of the professional tomato guys. What's the biggest difference there?
Well, a lot of it is when you plant the tomato, if you raise your tomatoes from seed, then when they get 5 to 6 weeks old, they need to be in the ground. Now that's at say 6-inch tall tomato, 5 or 6-inch tall tomato. That tomato needs to go in the ground. It doesn't do like maybe a gardener where the tomatoes get a little bigger. You lay the tomato down because it's going to root at all stages along the plant. And but in professional, you just set it in the ground like a tobacco plant, and that's where you start. You don't plant it deep. It's not planted deep. It's maybe 4 or 5 inches at the most, and that's one of the differences. And the way you may prune the tomatoes, we professionals stake and string, and that's what I do in my garden. I stake and string because that's what I learned from the professionals.
What Joe is talking about, he's calling it stake and stringing. Another term for that is the Florida weave. So if you Google Florida weave for tomatoes, you'll see how that's done. And we'll throw a photo up here as well. Sorry, I'm looking through my notes here. So this is how commercial growers support their tomatoes, because a lot of times they're growing long rows of tomatoes at a time, and there's lots of tomatoes and lots of rows. So it's more efficient and it's more cost effective to stake and string those tomatoes, because a lot of times you can reuse those stakes and then you just have to buy new string most of the time. And this is actually how I support my tomatoes, again, because I have prior experience too.
Right.
So before I even got into gardening, in high school, I worked for a certified organic CSA operation over in New Knoxville, Ohio, called Harvest Sun Farm, and that's how we supported our tomatoes, was the stake and stringing, or the Florida weave. So that's my experience. But again, if you only have a handful of tomatoes, it's probably not worth the material and the work to do that. Now, if you have, I would say, 10 plus tomatoes and then they're all in a real long row, or you've got a couple long rows of tomatoes, it might be worth the investment to not buy the cages and to get some stakes and some string. And then you got to think, to store 50 tomato cages in the off season,
Right.
they don't collapse, they don't store nicely. So that's another thing to think about. In that off season with the stakes, you can just pile those stakes up and put them in the corner, and they'll be pretty much unnoticed. But again, things to think about whenever you're getting into gardening and starting to think about it. You have to think about, your pre-season planning of the garden, but also what happens after the garden,
Right.
and where's all that material going to go.
As we worked with them through the years.
So Joe,
Almost
I'm gonna stop you there real quick. So you stake and string instead of caging, right? And so
Yeah.
how do you stake and string? Can you talk us through staking and stringing?
Tell them how you say this.
Well, I used to use 1x1 wood stakes, about 5 foot tall or so. Now I have metal stakes, and of course, I'm not able to drive them in the ground anymore. So I just take my tractor and the bucket on my tractor, and I push it down. I stake them with my tractor, and then when you string them, you buy a box of what I call tomato stringing, and you have a PVC pipe that you run this string through and put a cap on each end, and you go around the plant and around the stake, and you wrap it around the stake and go to the next one and wrap it around, and you just go down the row, and you come back down the other side, and then your string is there with the tomato between them. And like right now, I've strung mine 3 times, and I'm ready to string one more time.
We have 3 tomato plants between each stake. So, and they're spaced out, so they have room to grow. So, and that's the way the professional growers do it.
Some of them do too, but we just strip it out of that a little more.
So that string is wrapped around the stem? Is that how that
No,
holds?
no, it's wrapped around the stake.
And it runs beside the stem.
Runs beside the stem.
Gotcha. And then you come back on the other side, and it's like pancaked in.
Yes.
That's it.
I learned something already. I'm not a professional tomato grower, so I don't stake and string my tomatoes, and then I plant them too deep and curve them up.
Well,
Me too, Luke. Me too.
I do mine like I did when we did the professionals. That's the difference between me and somebody else. Is it wrong another way? Not necessarily. There are a lot of ways to do things differently that none of them are wrong. Everything will work, and how you do it, how I do it may be a little different, but it's the principle behind getting out there, working with them, doing what you need to do, and going from that direction.
That's really interesting. I had a follow-up question from previously about indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. Talk to us about that.
Well, I can't tell you a whole lot about it. I mean, it's just like the plants in a crop. But the determinate usually shorter producing times, and that's what most of the professional growers used because their tomatoes are all coming in at a given time, and because of the commercial market. And the indeterminate tomatoes typically have a longer growing season than throughout the season, and so a lot of them don't plant those. They can be planted more in gardens and things because their season is whatever the market that fits them works. And I guess that's the difference in the two.
Gotcha.
So I feel like we talk about this in every single video of keeping your goals in mind and making your garden work for you. And we're just going to keep beating that dead horse, I guess. So when you think about your goals, and I'm going to talk about mine specifically because that's what I can speak to. So for my garden, I can and process a lot of it. So I want a really meaty tomato. I don't want a whole lot of juice in there. I know Diane, she does a lot of tomato juice, so she wants more juice in her tomatoes. Personally, I don't want that because it's just longer to cook down. So I plant paste tomatoes, and then I also plant determinate tomatoes. And this is something that I just started doing last year. So this will be the second year that I'm growing paste determinate tomatoes and making it a priority and focusing on that, because whenever I go to can, I want a lot of those tomatoes to come ripe at the same time, so I have enough to process. I don't want to pick a few here and a few there, and then it just keeps growing. Because once I'm done canning, I want to be done. I want the garden to be done.
Right.
At the middle of September, I'm tapped out, and I don't want my tomatoes just to keep producing. Yeah. So that's something else to think about is, do you want one tomato plant just for tomatoes for your sandwiches? Or do you want, to make pizza sauce and pasta sauce and salsa and tomato juice? Because all those things, variety makes a difference. And Joe has mentioned that previously, that variety makes a difference. And it's just thinking through some of those things. And some of those things you're not going to know until you get into it.
Right.
When we got married, when I started gardening 6-7 years ago, I was not thinking about canning tomatoes. I was thinking about just planting them. But again, keeping your goals in mind and really doing what you can to achieve those goals. So then, I guess by our made up definition, you can be a master gardener.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% clear on that myself, so that's interesting. So what other stuff do you guys put out in your gardens? So I know here at the lab we have radishes right now coming on. Our onions are coming in. We got tomatoes planted. We're going to do corn and beans. Unfortunately, we didn't have time or the space this year to do like cabbage and broccoli and stuff like that. So what do you all do?
Well, this year, I'm going to say typically we grow cabbage, we grow broccoli, we grow onions, we grow radishes, and all that's planted around the 1st of March, somewhere around there in the coolest seasons. And then as it warms up, we plant okra, we plant all the different types of string beans, purple hull peas, watermelon, cantaloupe, and
We've got a cucumber this year.
yeah, got cucumber, and but we do this considerably a technical term or a math. We do that after blackberry winter, which is when the blackberries bloom. We always have a cold snap. And so that's kind of blackberry winter. After blackberry winter, we planted tomatoes and all the others. But we have a variety, sweet corn. Now, I have not planted any sweet corn lately because the last that I did, the coons ate it all. And my neighbors raise sweet corn and sell, my farmers, and they give it to me. So I can get it. They have de-silters and things that they use to sell their corn, and it makes it awful easy on us. So we just tell them we want 100 ears, and they bring it to us, or we go pick it up.
So I'm really glad that Joe brought this up. So he has learned that sweet corn doesn't do well in his garden because the raccoons eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of continuing to grow it and continuing to let the raccoons eat it, he has freed up that space in his garden to plant something else. And it just works out that his neighbor does sweet corn, and it does really well for him. So he doesn't do it, but he gets sweet corn from his neighbor. And I think you have talked about before, part of gardening, part of the beauty of gardening is being able to share that produce.
I think it's a plus when you have a garden. I mean, if you are two people, if you don't have kids and you're gardening just for you and your significant other, like you don't have, there's not enough people in your household to eat everything that you produce in some cases. So I think at least for me, for a big goal is to be able to share and to be able to give some of that produce to others. And I think that's, I don't know, I think what the video you're referencing is the why to garden.
Yeah.
And it's the why for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then too, so with that, Joe and Diane have created a deeper relationship with their neighbor, but also have built a community around that. And I think that goes back to, really Brookside amplifies core values for sure. And something else that I want to highlight is when we have new consultants come in, we ask them to read The Go-Giver. And it's a wonderful book, and I've read it. And the one thing that stuck with me in that book is when somebody offers to give you something and you say no, you're taking away their ability to give. So, and then with gardening, so you share with others, but also it opens up, a symbiotic relationship. You can share with them, and then in return, they can share something different with you. And it's really just creating a nice community and a nice harmony. And we need that human connection as people. We need that interaction.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, what's the blackberry winter?
Blackberry winter? It's when
Yeah, the blackberry winter.
When the blackberry vines are blooming.
It's always a cold, wet spell.
That's one of the myths, if you want a myth. But that's a fact. If you plant something in the garden, warm season plant like a tomato in the garden before the blackberries bloom, you will more than likely have to cover it up with a bucket. Cover that plant up because you're going to have a frost. And you don't want a frost on a tomato because you won't have a tomato. So, don't you have blackberries up there?
In our area, the myth is spring is not officially here until the river comes out of its banks 3 times, and we've had 2, and we're still waiting. And we're 15 degrees below normal for this time of year, temperature-wise. So we're waiting for that river to come out of its banks 3 times. Now, unfortunately, most of the farmers have planted. I would say we're probably 70% planted in corn and beans now, so the farmers don't really want that. But the river needs to come out one more time, and then we'll officially start spring.
There are a lot of wives' tales when it comes to gardening and really anything in life. And I think some of them are far-fetched, or some parts of them are far-fetched. But I do think there's some validity to parts of them. And then when you think back to when did these wives' tales really get started, or how did they get started? And you think about the time frame that they got started. I mean, some of them were 50, 100, maybe even 200 years
Right.
ago. And we think, why? And I think part of it is to get information from generation to generation. A huge part of that was through storytelling, through wives' tales, and relating certain tasks that you do, whether it's in the garden or not, to what's going on in nature. And really, that's, getting back to how things used to be. Is we're seeing that trend more and more. So again, I think there are some that are far-fetched, but like Diane said, I mean, they've been gardening for many years, and if you put your tomatoes out before that blackberry winter, you're probably going to have to cover them up, or they're going to get zapped by a late frost. So there is some validity to them.
Yeah, and I think another one that's really prevalent to our area is don't plant until Mother's Day or after. And while Mother's Day may not be the significant pinpoint, it's that time of the year. So middle of May, you're very unlikely to have temperatures below 40 after that. So I think it's just finding that time of the year where things will work, whether it's the Mother's Day, whether it's the one Diane mentioned, whatever it is. It's a reminder, or it's a helpful reminder of, well, Mother's Day is also around that time. So we'll just kind of put the two together. And I think that's where a lot of old wives' tales come from, is that just Mother's Day is an easier ear marker to remember. It's
and they're regional. And
I think that's what makes them validity in them true too, is, it may sound silly to say don't plant until after Mother's Day, but why is Mother's Day the big day? It's not Mother's Day necessarily.
It's not like some magical thing happens on Mother's Day.
It's marking that time of the year with a significant date, which it just so happens to be Mother's Day, for an example. But,
and it's regional. So here in Ohio, blackberry winter, I mean, that's not one that we follow.
No.
But Joe and Diane, and we've mentioned this before, they're in a different growing zone. So if you look at, USDA has a nice map of growing zones. They're in Tennessee. That's a much different growing environment than here in West Central Ohio.
So it's interesting, the old wives' tales that are out there, and for the most part, they seem to hold true.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Well, I had a farmer that he told me all the time. He said, "We never plant these creek bottoms till after the May rain."
Yep.
And that's just, it's a myth, but they believe in it.
Yeah. Well, my grandmother used to get her hair cut by the moon phases, so there's something with that. You never had a good haircut at certain moon phases, so apparently there's something that has to do with some of this. But no, that's really interesting. Aaron, do you guys have a garden?
Yeah. Raised beds.
Yeah, that's what we have. Well, we have our garden here, but at home, that's what we have, is a raised bed, living in town. So of course, unfortunately, we have to be real picky about our space. My wife and son always want to put out watermelon and cucumbers. We just don't have the space to do all that. So
yeah, I can go either way on the raised bed or flat planted. We do raised beds. We live in town, and didn't want to till up my yard, and I get to play around because I can create my own soil. If I don't like that soil, I can change it out and try something different.
Which is beneficial, considering, what we're planning into outside here this year. That would be beneficial if I could change my soil. That would help tremendously, because what we've been given isn't necessarily the greatest soil to try to plant a garden into, but we're going to make do. So, but there's another myth, right? You have to have fantastic, perfect soil to have a garden. We may not get the greatest production this year, but we're going to get some production.
Yeah.
So no, what I found is that you need more than 1 year to get your soil. You can start off with a plan, get it soil tested, and then get an idea of what you need to add. but then you got to go retest it to see if you got there or not. So it takes more than 1 year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it does. That my garden, my soil pH is 7. My phosphate levels are a little higher than I like, but they are over around 1100. My potash is 6%. But it didn't happen overnight. These things, you have to work with it and get it there.
20 years he worked on it.
How many years?
20
on this one.
on this particular garden.
I have it in the same place every year. And it's probably 40 by 70. That's as bigger than we can handle now, just about. But anyway, I used to have a little bigger garden than that before we moved up to this area of West Tennessee. I had a bigger garden, and you tell people to come by and get something and just help yourself. But quite often people won't come and pick it. If you pick it and give it to them, they're glad to get it. And my contention was, if you're able, you come get it. If you're not able, I'll bring it to you.
That's a big garden. That's a lot of garden to manage. And that's one of the things that I think people don't understand about gardens is it is a lot of work that goes into a garden. If you want a good, successful garden, it really does take time. You really do. Those plants become almost like your children. Like you're out there, you have to stake those tomatoes, you have to pull the weeds, you have to, all the prep that goes into it. It's like, having a baby, right? There's a lot of prep that went into having that your kids and then raising those kids and that you're doing it on an annual basis in a garden. And it's a very similar situation where you're trying to, give them the best environment and everything to produce a fantastic crop. So, but it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of time. So if you're interested in getting into gardening, don't think you're going to go out, throw some seeds out and walk away and come back and you're going to have, a perfect garden. It just takes time and patience and and a lot of work. But it's a great way if you think back, for us as a family, it's a great way to go out there together and get dirty and we laugh and have fun. And I'm sure you all have had some of those same experiences. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It can be a lot of fun. It gets aggravating sometimes because if things will begin to get away from you sometimes. And that creates a problem.
The weeds are always what seem to get away from me. When we had our big garden, the weeds would always get away. I always come home from work and like, what did you guys do all day? Like, well, you're supposed to pull the weeds in the garden.
Yeah, it's different. I remember one time though, this is kind of off track a little bit, but one of my professional growers, he called me. He said, "I need you to come up here and look at the tomatoes." Well, I went up there and he said, "Come on, go with me. Just put the truck over there." So we went off for a little while and we came back and I'm wondering all the time, what were we talking about? And I got back and I had 20-pound boxes of tomatoes in the back of my truck. And I said, "What are you doing putting these tomatoes in my truck?" Like, well, the market is so cheap we can't sell them, so we thought we'd just give them to you. So I carried them around and gave boxes of tomatoes to farmers.
I'm sure they appreciated that.
Oh,
So as we kind of wrap up our first session here, do you have to be a trained master gardener to be a successful gardener? And I want to show off that cabbage plant that's sitting behind, or the cabbage head sitting behind you, because that thing is massive. You want to bring that up to the screen?
Uh,
That's
you
that's
see,
really cool.
it's pretty good size.
Is it in the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So again, you don't have to be a trained master gardener to be a gardener, to have success at gardening.
No, you do not.
You need to know some people. You need to be willing to make mistakes, is what I heard today. Maybe ask questions from your neighbors. Know people who are growing something that you aren't in exchange. I heard that today. There's a lot of good resources out there like Aaron and Joe and Diane that you can call on who, maybe aren't master gardeners, but have 20, 30, 60, 70 years plus of gardening experience. And they're going to tell you, well, we made mistakes, but those mistakes turned into what, Aaron?
Success we need is skin in the game.
Yeah.
Go plant it.
Yep. So
And in 25 years, you'll be a master gardener. Just like Joe.
I'm just out there having a good time.
any final thoughts from anybody?
If the ladies want to garden and be economical, I very seldom buy any vegetables, any corn, any beans, peas in a grocery store because I can it. And I used to be a teacher, so as my summers came, that's when I put my vegetables up, so that all I had to do was come home, open a jar, and I had supper almost ready. And that's something they can do, and if they want to think ahead for economics, I mean, it's not cheap to garden because after you get it, you got to have the jars and the lids and the want to put it up. And if you just want it to eat out of, a small garden is fine. If you want, like ours, we've got 40 plus tomato plants sitting out there waiting for the tomatoes to grow so I can make tomato juice. And that's my aim, is just to make tomato juice.
That's one of the reasons that we have more tomatoes is you've got to have a good many to come off at the same time to be able to can them and make the juice. So you end up raising more tomatoes than what you would do in a smaller garden.
Yep. I think we're going to have at least 50 out here. I said, if nothing else, we're going to have between the peppers and tomatoes, when the lab gets slow, we're going to have a big salsa making week here at the lab this come August.
We said peppers. We have bell peppers and we have eggplant and zucchini squash, yellow squash. We got all that in the garden.
Yep. Well, again, I appreciate everybody's time. We're going to wrap up this session today, and next time we're going to talk about the myth, some is good, more is better. So join us on our next episode, and we're going to talk about that gardening myth, because people seem to like, if some fertility is good, let's put more on it, and we're going to do well. So join us on our next episode, and we hope you enjoy what you learned today.
That concludes today. I'm really excited to see how the next one comes out with we've mentioned this before, if some is good, more is better, and that's not always the case with nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for Luke and Aaron to really digest that one. That'll be a good one to tune into once that one's available. Yep. But I want to say thanks to you all for tuning in today, and thanks to our guests. So thanks to Luke, Aaron, and Joe and Diane for really sharing their stories and helping us navigate through, some of the misconceptions or the nuances that come with gardening, and it can seem intimidating because mm-hmm. there's so much, we have access to so much information. Right. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think this is an important one, because I think it kind of shows you don't have to know everything to produce a successful garden.
Right. And I think another thing that I want to add is, just find something. If you want to get into gardening, find something that you want to learn about, or find something that you want to grow,
Yeah.
and just get started. A lot of times the hardest part is just taking that first step and getting
Doing
started.
the work, the upfront work of getting it
Yeah.
up
So
and ready.
just, just getting it started, and we're sitting here and June's knocking on the door, and I was actually just having a conversation with Luke, and it's like it's not too late
No.
to get a garden out. I mean, some things, the cool season crops, we're really getting out of that cool
Right.
season window. But as far as like sweet corn and green beans and tomatoes and
We
peppers,
have all summer. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, of course we want to get them in the ground, but I mean, at the end of the day, what's another week? What's
Yeah.
another few more days?
Right.
It's not the end of the world.
Right.
There's really not that taking time bomb
Right.
when it
Right.
comes to it.
And I mean, as long as frost isn't knocking on
Right.
the door, but we're
Yes.
not to that point yet. And frost, the first frost, it seems like it's getting later and later
Mhm.
each year.
Yep.
So, not an old wives' tale. I think that's just something that I've observed
Yep.
in the last few years. But again, thanks for tuning in, and we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions, or if there was something that was talked about here today and you want to know more, please let us
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I think leave a comment on a myth that you thought was helpful,
Yeah.
or that you thought actually seemed to be true, that that has helped you in your gardening experience.
Yeah, or if there's something that I don't do this task until here,
until this thing happens.
right.
Yeah.
So thanks again for tuning in. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on Amplify Your Garden.
Okay.
I like that. Oh shoot.